Anim zemirot v'shirim erog, ki elecha nafshi tarog. Nafshi kimda betzel yadecha ladat korasodecha. Midei dabri bikvodecha, omer libi el dodecha. Yerav nasi ki alecha, ki nafshi tarog elecha.
This season urges us to change our ways. But how can we? Is not our future already determined by our past, by the goals we've pursued, the habits we've formed, the relationships we've established, the countless choices, great and small, which we've made over the years?
And yet our destiny is not unalterable, for God has made us free. However strong may be the shackles of our past, we can break its hold. We can change course and so escape from the sequence of events which we ourselves have set in motion.
But to do so requires a supreme effort. The effort of teshuvah, of earnest resolve to lead a better life. To urge us, and to help us to make such an effort is the purpose of this season. If we seize the opportunity it offers, we can liberate ourselves from our past and so avert the destiny to which it would otherwise lead.
May the medieval poem which we now recite stir us as it stirred our ancestors to recognize that we are subject to God's judgment and that the nature of God's judgment depends on the quality of our lives.
Let us proclaim the holiness of this day, a day of deepest awe. On this day your sovereignty is exalted, your throne confirmed in mercy, and on that throne you sit in truth. For truly you are judge and arbiter, expert and witness. You write and seal, record and recount. You remember deeds long forgotten, you open the book of records, and what is written there proclaims itself, for it bears the signature of every human being. The great shofar is sounded, the still small voice is heard, and all who dwell on earth stand arrayed before you. Eternal God, it is not the death of sinners you seek, but that we should turn from our ways and live. You wait for us until the last moment, welcoming us back if then we turn to you with contrite heart. You have created us and know our nature. We are but flesh and blood.
Sa
יהיו לרצון עירבי, והגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי, אדוני צורי וגואלי, יהיו לרצון עירבי, והגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי, אדוני צורי וגואלי.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was empty and without form. Darkness covered the face of the deep, and God's Spirit moved over the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness.
O God, whose glory the heavens proclaim, you rule the cosmos with a law that stars, planets, and moons must obey. For countless ages, the sun flooded our small planet with light. Yet no eye beheld its brilliance. The winds whispered and roared, but no ear heard their soft murmurs or thundering peals. Then your creative word went forth. Let there be more than light. Let there be life to cover the face of the earth.
And God said, "Let the waters teem with living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth across the vault of heaven." And God said, "Let the earth bring forth every species of living creature, cattle, reptiles, and wild beasts." And it was so.
Microscopic creatures were born in the shallow waters, of one substance with earth and sea and air, but your creative word endowed them with powers new. They could feed and sustain themselves, reproduce and multiply. Some had the further gift of sense, to perceive, explore, and apprehend their world. Thus dawned that consciousness which was a provision of the human mind. And so by your word, the earth awoke. A flood of life burst forth to shape innumerable forms of life in an endless variety of living species.
Praise the Eternal One, O my soul. O my God, you are very great. You are arrayed in glory and majesty. You wrap yourself in light as with a garment. You stretch out the heavens like a curtain.
You set the earth on its foundations, that it might never be moved. You covered it with oceans as with a cloak. The waters stood higher than the mountains.
Then, at your rebuke, they fled. At the sound of your thunder, they rushed away. Rising over the hills, cascading into the valleys, to the place which you assigned to them.
You set a limit which they should not pass, lest they return to cover the earth. You send streams to spring forth in the valleys. They run between the mountains.
giving drink to all the beasts of the field. The wild asses quench their thirst. The birds of the air nest on their banks and sing among the leaves.
From aloft, you water the mountains, that the earth may be filled with the fruit of your works. You make grass grow for the cattle, and plants for us to cultivate, that bread may come forth from the earth.
And wine to cheer our hearts, and oil to make our faces radiant, and bread to sustain our strength. The trees of the Eternal One drink their fill, the cedars God planted in Lebanon.
There the birds build their nests, while the stork makes its home in the fir trees. The wild goats roam the high mountains. The badgers find refuge among the rocks.
You made the moon to mark the seasons. The sun knows its time of setting. You make darkness, and it is night, when all the beasts of the forest go prowling.
And the young lions roar for prey, demanding their food from God. When the sun rises, they slink away and go to their lairs to rest.
Then we go to our work, to our labor till evening falls. How manifold are your works, Eternal One. In wisdom have you made them all. The earth is full of your creations. Let the heavens be glad and the earth rejoice. Let the sea and all that fills it roar out praise.
Yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai mai ma mai mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai 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 mai, yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai mai ma mai mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai. ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ Yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai mai ma mai mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai 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 mai, yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai, yama mai mai ma mai mai ma mai mai ma mai, yama mai ma mai.
Every living creature partakes of your wisdom. Fish move and multiply in the cool waters of river, lake, and ocean. Birds glide effortlessly in the unbounded heavens. Beasts of prey go hunting without need of instruction. Other creatures use an instinctive ability to flee, to hide, and to defend themselves and their young. But to one species, more than all others, you were lavish in your gifts.
And God said, let us make a human being in our image, after our likeness, and let them take charge of the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the animals, the whole earth, and everything that creeps on the ground. Then God created human beings in the divine image, in the very image of God, making them male and female. And God saw the whole creation, and it was very good.
Human beings were seemingly without defense. not for them the tiger's claws, or the rhinoceros's thick hide, or armadillo's scaly armor. To the gazelle they were slow of foot, to the lion, weaklings, and the condor thought them bound to earth. But you gave them powers that other creatures could not comprehend. A skillful hand, a probing mind, a loving heart, a soul aspiring to know and fulfill its destiny.
Eternal One, our God, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have stamped your glory upon the heavens. When I look at the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are we that you are mindful of us, we mortals, that you care for us? Yet you have made us little less than divine and crowned us with glory and honor. You have appointed us to look after all that you have made. You have placed all creation in our care, sheep and cattle, all of them, beasts and birds and fish, and all that travel the ocean's paths. Eternal One, our God, how majestic is your name in all the earth.
You gave us wit to fashion tools to meet our needs, and the power of speech, that magic gift by which each soul, unique and separate, yet shares its life with others, so that the distance between human beings is bridged by sympathy and understanding. Thus, it came about that though each individual, unaided and alone, is weak and helpless, your gift of love has taught us the art of living with our fellow men and women in one humanity. How good it is and how pleasant when brothers and sisters live together in unity.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
Human growth came not by might nor by power, but by your spirit, the thirst for knowledge, the urge to create, the passion for justice, the will to give love and loyalty. Sometimes we have seen this and lived at peace with one another, seeking a common good, but all too often we have lost touch with the divine wisdom within us, preferring ways of savagery, abusing our gift for invention to forge for ourselves an ever more sinister armory of weapons of mass destruction. God created human beings with both the inclination to do good and the inclination to do evil.
And the Eternal One saw that the wickedness of human beings on earth was great, and that their heart seemed ever bent on evil.
How long, Eternal One, shall the curse of Cain continue to haunt the human race? How long shall Abel's blood, the innocent blood cruelly shed in countless wars, plead all unheeded that we are brothers and sisters, and every one the keeper of every other? Cannot the race whose mind and will explore the far reaches of the universe do equal wonders on its native earth? Though our deeds are stained with blood, this we know. You have set in the inmost sanctuary of our being your law of justice, love, and peace. The flame which burns upon that altar may flicker, but it can never be quenched. That flame is your eternal spirit, burning within us. Long ago, but well we remember it, you inspired a people, the house of Israel, to recognize that flame and minister to it as a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, This was to be the meaning and the message of their existence. This was the calling of him who gave up home and hearth to found a nation pledged to do your will.
Then the Eternal One said to Abraham, Lechilach, to a land that I will show you. Lech lecha, to a place you do not know. Lechilach, on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing, and you shall be a blessing, and you shall be a blessing. Lechilach, Lechilach, and I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lechilach, to the land that I will show you. Lesimchat chayim, lesimchat chayim, lesimchat chayim, lechilach. And you shall be a blessing, and you shall be a blessing, and you shall be a blessing. Lechilach. Go forth from your country and your birthplace and your parental home to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. Through you shall all the families of the earth be blessed.
Many generations later, redeemed from slavery, Abraham's descendants stood at Mount Sinai. The ancient promise was to be confirmed, the ancient mandate reasserted and enlarged, the ancient covenant renewed and sealed to bind all future generations.
When God revealed the Torah, no bird chirped, no fowl beat its wings, no ox bellowed. The angels did not sing praises, the sea did not stir. No creature uttered a sound. The world was silent and still, and the divine voice spoke. I am the Eternal One, your God.
Thus pledged to play a redemptive role in the unfolding destiny of humanity, Israel journeyed on from Sinai and reached the Promised Land, the land they loved, and which seemed to love them in return. On one of its mountains they built a city, Jerusalem, and on top of the mountain a temple, a symbol of the splendor of the universal sovereignty of Israel's God, and of their loyalty to the Eternal One.
Yet that loyalty faltered and failed again and again. They lusted after the Baalim and treated lightly the covenant with Israel's God. They relied on priestly ritual, invoking the protection of the temple while they oppressed the needy. Prophet after prophet rebuked them, pleaded with them to return to the fountain of living water, saying, "Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your conduct from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, correct oppression, defend the orphan, plead for the widow."
Corrupted within and assailed from without, Israel stumbled and fell. The city was stormed, the temple burnt to ashes, the flower of the nation carried captive to the conqueror's land. By the rivers of Babylon we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. Upon its willows we hung our harps. There our captors demanded of us a song, and our tormentors required us to be joyful, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How shall we sing God's song in a strange land?
The exiles did not forget Zion. Their prophets taught them that God had not deserted them. They had deserted God. To God they must and will return. The time of their restoration is at hand.
Be comforted, my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Proclaim to her that her bondage is ended, her iniquity pardoned, that she has received from the Eternal One's hand ample punishment for all her sins. A voice proclaims, build a road for the Eternal through the wilderness, clear a highway in the desert for our God. Every valley shall be raised high, every mountain and hill made low. The uneven ground shall be made level, the rough places a plain. The glory of the Eternal One shall be revealed, and all humanity shall see it, for the mouth of the Eternal One has spoken.
It seemed like a dream, but it was true. The exiles returned. They laughed for joy. God had done great things for them, and to God's name they dedicated a new temple. Here the ancient forms of worship were resumed, and new ones evolved. Chief among them, the Day of Atonement.
The ritual begins at dawn. Great crowds converge from far and near upon the temple till its courts are filled to overflowing with priests and Levites, men and women, young and old. The high priest has prepared himself for 7 days. How can he intercede for others if he is impure himself? All night he has rehearsed the sacred ritual. Robed in gold, he burns the incense, offers the sacrifices, dispatches a he-goat into the wilderness as a symbol of the people's longing to be rid of sin. How splendid he looks in his glittering array. How heavy is his responsibility as he enters the Holy of Holies, that curtained chamber, mysterious yet simple, containing nothing but a stone.
3 times the high priest recites a confession of sins, first clad in white on his own behalf and on behalf of his own family. So too, we must first purify ourselves and the institutions we hold sacred, our homes, our synagogues, our schools. O God, let them be dwelling places of your presence, where love and justice are taught and practiced. May we always enter them with eager hearts, abide in them with ardent spirits, and from them go into the world with dedication and firm resolve, faithfully to carry out the tasks of life. So may we too be priests, ministering to the needs of others, and making more apparent in the world the beauty of holiness.
Adonai, kapena, lachatayim, v'lavonot, v'lapshayim, shechatati, v'she'aviti, v'she'pashati, lefanecha. Ani uveiti kakatuv, ki vayom hazeh yekapel echem letaher etchem mikol chatotechem lifnei Adonai titharu.
Having confessed his own sins, the high priest recites a similar confession on behalf of all the priests, the sons of Aaron, and a third time on behalf of the whole house of Israel. We too pray not only for ourselves, but for the Jewish people as a whole, whose destiny is our own and whose hope we share. Alas, how much there is in the life of our people that is unworthy of its noble past and its high calling. Some have strayed from the faith of their ancestors and broken the chain of tradition. Some have despised their birthright and treated their heritage with the contempt of indifference.
Some have made an idol of professional advancement, social status, and material reward. Some, while claiming to love humanity, have withheld from their own people the love it deserves.
Some have cared only for their own people, forgetting that Judaism is not Judaism if it does not move us to love and serve all humanity. Some, by their wrong actions or by their failure to act, have brought dishonor on the good name of our people.
In our own communal life, there is much needless strife and groundless hatred, dividing the community of Israel. And in the name of unity, we sometimes disregard the greater virtue of integrity.
Self-seeking leaves little room for self-sacrifice, and our high-sounding words are all too rarely translated into action.
For all these sins, we ask forgiveness and pray that the house of Israel, purified, reconciled, and reconsecrated, may again become worthy to stand in your presence and to be the messenger of your word, eternal one, our God and God of our ancestors.
When the priests and the people who stood in the temple court heard the high priest, full of reverence, utter God's holy and awesome name, they fell upon their faces and prostrate exclaimed, "Praise forever be God's glorious majesty."
Our God and God of our ancestors, forgive us, pardon us, and grant us atonement.
The temple did not last forever. The second, like the first, came to an end, and all its splendid rituals, including those of Yom Kippur, became a wistful memory. But when it fell, a new and greater institution stood ready to take its place, the synagogue, house of the people's assembly.
No sacrifices were offered here. No priests performed mysterious rites, while the laity watched in silent awe. Here Israel's peoples met as equals, together studying the word of God, so that the Torah which had been taught to Moses and the prophets became in truth the heritage of the congregation of Jacob, together chanting prayer and praise to their Creator, bringing to God, instead of bullocks, the offering of their lips and the service of their hearts, together seeking atonement, not through outward sacrifice, but through repentance, prayer, and good deeds. Here in the synagogue, our ancestors encountered the presence of God and the guidance they needed to hallow their lives. And as they entered, they sang, Equipped with synagogues and schools, and with a library of sacred books, spelling out the will of God for every situation, we went out into the world, sometimes freely, sometimes under duress, to face its perils and its challenges, to establish in pagan lands enclaves of godliness, to proclaim God's unity and sovereignty, and the demand that humans shall be humane.
As we look back upon our past, of bitter suffering nobly endured, of stubborn survival, defying the patterns of history, of creative achievements and world-transforming influences, we wonder, what are we? What is the role assigned to us? Did God choose us, or did we choose God? Or did God choose us because we chose God? There's a mystery here which reason cannot solve, nor cynicism dismiss. We can deny it, or we can humbly recognize it, and each resolve to be a part of it, saying to God, Hineni, here am I, send me.
You declared your words to Jacob, your statutes and precepts to Israel. Keep them, therefore, and do them, for in this shall the people see your wisdom and understanding. To you the nations shall come from the ends of the earth and say, We will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. And many peoples shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Eternal One, to the house of the God of Jacob, so that we may learn God's ways and walk in God's paths. For out of Zion shall go forth God's teaching, and the word of the Eternal One from Jerusalem.
You are my witnesses, says the Eternal One, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you understand that I am the one. Before me no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me. I alone am the Eternal, and besides me there is no Saviour.
God's servants and witnesses, generation after generation, in times of darkness as in times of light, we've struggled to fulfill the divine word. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We have felt the joy of being God's servants, but we have also felt the pain.
The wandering Jews sought a life and a livelihood in many lands of dispersion. There were times of degradation, then glory, and sadly so often back to persecution. Dark ages have afflicted our people, and yet suffering is not our fate alone. The inhumanity of human beings to one another knows no borders and recognizes no distinctions of color or faith. The earth's crust is soaked with the tears of the innocent. The blood of every race cries out from the ground. Which is the people without its martyrs? Who has not known war and savage invasion? Where have men and women and children not cowered in cellars and caves, keeping the small flame of life burning against the gale of hate and fear? Now, therefore, we honor those of every race and faith and nation who have been innocent victims of cruelty, persecution, and murder. Men, women, and children treated with brutality beyond imagining, because they were marked out as being different. Our own time has witnessed innumerable victims, mistreated, tortured, and made to disappear at the hands of wicked regimes and their collaborators. When evil triumphs over good, all people suffer. As we recall the pain and torment inflicted on our own people, so do we honor and mourn all who endured a similar fate. They are our companions in death and our partners in grief throughout the ages. May they never be forgotten, and may a better world grow from the soil of their suffering. Yet on this day, we remember especially the suffering of our own people. For Jews, more perhaps than any others, have seen evil face to face. To the crushing of our bodies has been added the mocking of our ways, the burning of our books, the cursing of our faith. We have been homeless wanderers in a hostile world.
Look and remember. Look upon this land. Far, far across the factories and the grass. Surely there, surely they will let you pass. Speak then and ask the forest and the loam. What do you hear? What does the land command? The earth is taken. This is not your home.
Jewish history, it is true, is not a history of pain alone. We remember with gratitude and pride those achievements of our people which nourish the mind and spirit of all humanity. And we know of many ages when our people dwelt in peaceful habitations, planting and building, giving and receiving, living life without fear. Yet we remember that again and again in so many countries, including our own, this peace has been shattered. Men, women, and children have been persecuted, tortured, or driven away from their homes. For our enemies have not been content to cause us pain. Their dream was darker still. A world without Jews. A world which has forgotten our very name. From the days of Amalek to the days of modern tyrants, there have been those who sought to put an end to our very presence on this earth. We cannot forget this, or be indifferent to its meaning. We remember.
These things I remember as I pour out my heart. Ignorance, like a monster, has devoured our martyrs as in one long day of blood. Rulers have risen through the endless years, oppressive, savage in their witless power, filled with a futile thought, to make an end of that which God has cherished.
In the time of Hadrian, Emperor of Rome, the study and the practice of Torah were forbidden. Israel's leaders said, "How survive without the tree of life? Why live if the soul is dead?" And so they learned and taught and did God's will. 10 leading rabbis and teachers were taken and doomed. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was beheaded. Remembering his wisdom and witnessing his death, his disciples exclaimed, "Is this Torah, and this its reward?" Rabbi Yishmael was next to die. In pain and anguish he cried out. At his cry, the very heavens trembled. "Accept this, affirm me," a cosmic voice seemed to say, "or the world will crumble into chaos." And then Yishmael accepted his fate, saying, "Though you slay me, yet I will trust in you." These things I remember as I pour out my heart.
Rabbi Akiva had defied the decree and continued to teach. He was among those taken. He was led to his death at the time when the Shema is recited, and as his flesh was flayed, he said, "Hear, O Israel." "Even now?" his disciples asked. He replied, "All my life I have been troubled by the phrase, 'with all your soul.' Now I know what it means. Love God even to the point of death. I have always longed to be able to fulfill this, and now I can." And with his final breath he said, "The eternal God is one," prolonging the last word till life was gone. Thus was God affirmed in a godless world. These things I remember as I pour out my heart.
Though the Romans had forbidden the ordination of rabbis, decreeing death for ordainer and ordained alike, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava risked his life to ordain 5 of Akiva's students. When the Romans closed in, the students escaped, but Rabbi Yehuda was caught and executed. Yet thanks to him, the chain of tradition was not broken. These things I remember as I pour out my heart.
Other times, other places. In the days of the Crusades, whole communities of Jews were massacred throughout Europe. In one city, young and old donned armor and stood behind their leader, Rabbi Kalonimus ben Meshulam. The gate was smashed, their friends had fled, and death reached out with sword and fire. They said to one another, "Let us be strong and bear the yoke of our holy faith, for only in this world can the enemy kill us. As the flames mounted high, the martyrs began to sing in unison, a song that began softly, but rose to a crescendo. Those who heard it came and asked, "What kind of song is this? For we have never heard such a sweet melody." It was the Aleinu. Let us now praise the Sovereign of the universe. Other times, other places. For 1,000 years we sang the Eternal One song in the land of Spain. We shared its cities and towns with Christians and Muslims, sometimes in conflict, often in harmony. In Sepharad we sank the deepest roots. There the genius of our people flowered. Yet despite all this, expulsion came, and we were forced to leave.
A shipload of Jewish exiles from Spain, swept by the plague, were compelled to land on a desolate coast. Among them was a man, his wife and 2 children. As they struggled on through the waste, the wife died. The man carried his 2 sick children, but at last he fainted from fatigue and hunger. When he awoke, he found his 2 children dead by his side. He rose to his feet and said in grief, "Sovereign of the universe, much have you done to make me forsake my faith. But know for certainty that nothing you have brought or may still bring upon me will make me change. In spite of it all, a Jew I am, and a Jew I shall remain." It was not an Ibn Gabriel or a Maimonides, still less a Spinoza, who fulfilled the Jewish mission most truly, or rendered the greatest service to the Jewish cause. No, it was the many little obscure Jewish communities through the ages, persecuted and despised, who kept alive the flame of the purest monotheism and the supremacy and divineness of the moral law.
Other times, other places. One day, Hasidim came to inform the great Rebbe Nachman of Bratslav of renewed persecutions of Jews in the Ukraine. The master listened and said nothing. Then they told him of pogroms in certain villages. Again the master listened and said nothing. Then they told of slaughtered families, of desecrated cemeteries, of children burned alive. The master listened and shook his head.
"I know," he whispered. "I know what you want. I know. You want me to shout with pain, weep in despair. I know, I know. But I will not. You hear me? I will not." And after a long silence, he did begin to shout, louder and louder. "Gewalt Jiden! Jews, for heaven's sake, do not despair! Gewalt Jiden! Jews, do not despair!" These things I remember as I pour out my heart. But the horrors of the Middle Ages did return. Only yesterday we drained once more the cup of sorrow, and it was deeper than the world had ever known. 6 million died, and each 1,000,000 deaths. How many there are who rest in nameless graves, and how many whose ashes were blown by the winds to every corner of the earth. A voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children, for they are no more.
Rachel Eternal God, we have testified to your presence in the world. But in our day, your presence has been an absence, your call a silence. Long ago it was written in your name, if you are my witnesses, I am the Eternal One. And if you are not my witnesses, I am not the Eternal One. We have struggled to live for you and see what our fate has been.
Let us ask ourselves about silence, the silence of God and the silence of humanity. We have listened to survivors stammering their haunted words, struggling to explain. Through their words, the silence grows deeper, and we seek an answer still. And behind the silence, we know this gravest human sin will be found, the sin of indifference. What pains were taken during the Second World War to protect cathedrals and museums, lest treasures of art be destroyed? Meanwhile, in the streets and camps of Europe, an infinitely greater treasure lay dying, mothers and fathers and their children, while many looked away. To look away from evil, is this not the sin that we all commit? And yet, even in the inferno, even there were those who we call Hasidei Umot Ha'olam, the righteous of the nations. Some gave their very lives to keep Jews from harm. Who can measure such courage when so many were afraid to act? They bore witness to the greatness men and women can reach. Look and take heart. If ever such days return, remember them and find courage. Consider what can be done, what must be done to cherish in our souls the image of God. Let the righteous who were faithful be remembered for good. By their deeds, they have inscribed themselves in the book of life.
Warsaw, packed with Jews like a shawl on Yom Kippur. Jews crowded the walled-in, locked-in city. The first ones to be destroyed were the children, little orphans, abandoned upon the face of the earth. They who were the best in the world, the acme of grace on the dark earth. Oh, tender orphans. From them, the bereaved of the world in a house of shelter, we drew consolation. From the mournful faces, mute and dark, we said the light of day will yet break upon us. Do not cry. At this station, another girl I saw, about 5 years old. She fed her younger brother, and he cried, the little one. He was sick. Into a diluted bit of jam, she dipped tiny crusts of bread, and skillfully she inserted them into his mouth. This my eyes were privileged to see. To see this mother, a mother of 5 years, feeding her child, to hear her soothing words. My own mother, the best in the whole world, has not invented such a ruse. But this one wiped his tears with a smile, injected joy into his heart. A little girl in Israel. Sholem Aleichem could not have improved upon her.
We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And there were always choices to make. Every day, every hour offered the opportunity to make a decision which determined whether you would become the plaything of circumstances, renouncing freedom and dignity to become moulded into the form of the typical inmate, or whether you would choose instead to be free.
On shutting the door. Often, when I leave home, I think of you. How you'd have shut the door that last time they fetched you out at dawn. What fears would prophesy? What intimations could foretell the terrors of those plains, the herding into ash? Or maybe you looked around as if before a holiday, leaving no trace of dust, no crumbs for pests, no moths in cupboards, carpets, covered the chairs, the settee from the glare of light and sun, turned off the water, gas.
When Paul Robeson stood before a Moscow audience on the evening of June the 14th, 1949, in the Tchaikovsky Hall, few there expected to hear him perform the Yiddish partisan song, Zog Nick Keinmor, Never Say.
His rendition of this fierce anthem of defiance, with words written by partisan fighter Hirsch Glick in the middle of Nazi slaughter, was thick with emotion, and at the end the crowd either fiercely applauded or booed.
Robeson had sung for those he knew were already murdered, imprisoned or facing death, as a new wave of Stalinist repression was underway against Soviet Jews.
Песни еврейского гетто, оккупированной немцами Варшавы.
Keinmal als du gehst dem letzten Wege, wenn Himmeln bleien verstellen bläue Tage, weil kommen wird noch unser ausgebenkte Schau, uns wird abbeugt und unser Trott mir sein in Do, weil kommen wird noch unser ausgebenkte Schau, uns wird abbeugt und unser Trott mir sein in Do. Palmenland bis Weidenland von Schnee. Wir seien da mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wenn gefallen ist Spritz von unser Blut, wird noch sprotzt von unser Geburt, unser Mut. Und wenn gefallen ist Spritz von unser Blut, wird noch sprotzt von unser Geburt, unser Mut. Geschrieben ist das Lied mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht ein Lied von Sommervogel auf der Frei. Nos hat der Volk zwischen fallen dicker Wind. Das Lied gesungen mit ner Gannes in die Hand. Nos hat der Volk zwischen fallen dicker Wind. Das Lied gesungen mit ner Gannes in die Hand.
When Leo Beck came out of the black midnight of the concentration camp, he looked about at the world and those who inhabited it. Many averted their eyes. They had been silent, or they had followed the multitude to do evil. In the darkness of the camp, Leo Beck had not despaired. He had continued to believe in God and in human beings created in the divine image. Always he had sensed the Shekhinah weeping for her children. And so he continued his task as a rabbi. He taught and gave comfort. When he came back into a new world, seared by the flames of Auschwitz and Treblinka, Beck continued the task of comforting his people. He blessed the congregation. When he lifted up his hands for the priestly benediction, the congregation felt the Shekhinah hovering above them. May God look kindly upon you and be gracious to you. We need our teachers, those who died for the sanctification of the divine name, and those who survived to guide and comfort us. They tell us that the encounter with God can take place in the utmost darkness, if we are ready for it. The blessing which shone through Leo Beck must touch our lives. May God reach out to you in tenderness and give you peace.
After the suffering, we lay prostrate. But refusing to die, we rose again, to tend the wounded and comfort the bereaved, to foster the orphans and reunite the separated, to strengthen old communities still intact and to establish new ones in the far-flung corners of the earth, to found new synagogues and schools, and to write new books, retelling the tragic and heroic story of our people, which has not ended, and shall not end.
The hand of the Eternal One was upon me, and set me down in the midst of a valley. It was full of bones, and they were very dry. God said to me, O mortal, can these bones live? And I answered, Eternal One, you alone know.
Then God said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Eternal One. Behold, I will cause breath to enter you, that you may live. I will lay sinews upon you and cause flesh to come upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, that you may live. Then you shall know that I am the Eternal One.
So I prophesied as God commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived. They stood upon their feet, a very great host. Then God said to me, O mortal, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are cut off.
Therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says the Eternal God, behold, I will open your graves, O my people, and I will bring you home into the land of Israel. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live. I will place you in your own land, then you shall know that I, the Eternal One, have spoken and acted, says your God.
To the Bergen-Belsen survivors, with your visible and invisible innumerable scars, you are a greater miracle than the one in Ezekiel's valley. What? Can I start again? I don't know why I did that. Right. To the Bergen-Belsen survivors, with your visible and invisible innumerable scars, you are a greater miracle than the one in Ezekiel's valley. What sort of Jewish strength is there in your risen bones? Not only skin to skin, bone to bone, and flesh to flesh, but person to person, husband to wife. Through joy and mourning, through sorrow risked. Oh God, that's one sentence. Sorry, I might have to go back to sorry, I didn't realise that was because of the capital T. Confused me. Actually, I'll just change it. I'm going to have to do that again. I'm really sorry. Right. Also, I think I overdid it at one point. There is someone sniffing. I have to be careful. I think they did it in the middle of a bit that could be cut earlier. Anyway, I'll try again. To the Bergen-Belsen survivors, with your visible and invisible innumerable scars, you are a greater miracle than the one in Ezekiel's valley. What sort of Jewish strength is there in your risen bones? Not only skin to skin, bone to bone, and flesh to flesh, but person to person, husband to wife, through joy and mourning, through sorrow risked. Lively winds murmur around your new households, your newly built homes.
Out of the ashes of the Shoah, the state of Israel was born. But the price was high, sacrifice and suffering and relentless toil. Yet in the face of the hostility of its neighbours, with love, labour and unwavering resolve, the citizens of an old new country gave a new lease of life to an ancient land. The pledge of 100 generations not to forget Jerusalem was redeemed, The ancient prayer for a return to the land of our ancestors was answered.
The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. On those who dwelt in the shadow of death, its brightness shines. Zion hears and is glad. The daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments, O God.
Not only to the land of Israel do we look with hope, for the whole earth belongs to the Eternal One, and all peoples are God's children. Wherever the divine presence is sought, it may be found, and wherever God's teachings are studied, the Torah makes its home. We draw confidence from the revival of a vibrant Jewish life in nations where but a few decades ago all hope was lost, and pledge ourselves to work for its further restoration.
You are children of the Eternal One, your God, rich and poor, strong and weak, light and dark. God has knit all together by bonds of humanity, so that we may form one loving family.
An Arab shepherd is searching for his goat on Mount Zion. And on the opposite hill, I'm searching for my little boy. An Arab shepherd and a Jewish father, both in their temporary failure. Our two voices met above the Sultan's pool in the valley between us. Neither of us wants the boy or the goat to get caught in the wheels of the Hadgadia machine. Afterward, we found them among the bushes, and our voices came back inside us, laughing and crying. Searching for a goat or for a child has always been the beginning of a new religion in these mountains.
Have we not all one divine parent? Has not one God created us?
We know the wisdom by which you would have us live. Oceans of ink have been spilled to say it. Be faithful, be true. Love one another as you love yourselves. But the world is dark and cold with fear and rage. The hammer of chaos beats loudly within our breasts. How can we endure?
The storm will end. A rain will fall. A quiet meadow wind stir into being. And over a dead tree trunk, a waking bluebell with tongue of dew will carol in the morning.
A Jewish Cemetery in Germany by Yehuda Amichai. On a little hill amid fertile fields lies a small cemetery. A Jewish cemetery behind a rusty gate hidden by shrubs, abandoned and forgotten. Neither the sound of prayer nor the voice of lamentation is heard there, for the dead praise not the Lord. Only the voices of our children ring out, seeking graves and cheering each time they find one, like mushrooms in the forest, like wild strawberries. Here's another grave. There's the name of my mother's mothers, and a name from the last century. And here's a name, and there. And as I was about to brush the moss from the name, look, an open hand engraved on the tombstone, the grave of a Cohen, his fingers splayed in a spasm of holiness and blessing. And here's a grave concealed by a thicket of berries that has to be brushed aside, like a shock of hair from the face of a beautiful, beloved woman.
Ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin, באמונה שלמה, בביאת הגאולה, ואף על פי שתתמהמה, עם כל זה אני מאמין, עם כל זה אחכה לו, בכל יום שתבוא.
We pray for all who seek you. Though many differences of belief divide us, Yet let the desire to serve you, the longing to know you, and the pursuit of righteousness unite us. Strengthen the spirit of kinship between people of different faiths. And let us learn to live together with mutual understanding and respect until the time for which we hope, when a deeper insight and a larger vision shall bind all seekers after truth into one fellowship, worshipping the God of truth.
Zaki, Zaki, al ha'amlot, zu ani ha'cholem zar, Zaki kivad mamin, ki odeni mamin bar, Zaki kivad mamin, ki odeni Mamim bach, ki od nafshi drosho efet, lo machati le'egel paz, ki od amin gam ba'adam, gam beruch ruach az, ki od amin gam ba'adam, Gam beruch ruach az. Amina gam be'atid, afim yirchak ze hayom, ak bo yavo yisu shalom, az uvracha le'om milom, ak bo yavo Yisu shalom, az uvracha le'om milom.
Then I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Sons and daughters shall prophesy.
Your old shall dream dreams, and your young shall see visions. The hearts of parents shall be turned to their children,
And the hearts of the children to their parents.
And then all that has divided us will merge.
And then compassion will be wedded to power.
And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind.
And then both men and women will be gentle.
And then both women and men will be strong.
And then no person will be subject to another's will.
And then all will be rich and free and varied.
And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many.
And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance.
And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old.
And then all will nourish the young.
And then all will cherish life's creatures.
And then everywhere will be called Eden once again.
The Kaddish of Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev, chanted by Paul Robeson, is what are usually called the Hasidic chant of Levi Isaac. It's a version of the Kaddish attributed to the Hasidic master, Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev, 1740 to 1810. It's also known as the Din Torah mit God, the lawsuit with God.
According to tradition, Levi Yitzhak had composed the song spontaneously on a Rosh Hashanah as he contemplated the steadfast faith of his people in the face of their ceaseless suffering. He is said to have stood in the synagogue before the open ark where the Torah scrolls reside and issued his complaint directly to God.
Agot morgen der Ribbonoi shel oilem. Ich, Levi Yitzhak ben Sarah mit Bartichev, bin gekommen zu dir mit den Teure von dein Volk Israel. Was hast du zu sein, Volk Israel? Und was hast du sich angesetzt auf dein Volk Israel?
Good day to thee, Lord of the universe. I, Levi Yitzhak, son of Sarah from Berdichev, bring against you a lawsuit on behalf of your people, Israel. What do you have against your people, Israel? Why have you so oppressed your people, Israel?
After this questioning of divine justice, Levi Yitzhak proceeded to chant the Kaddish in attestation to God's sovereignty and supremacy. Not just an act of protest, his song was also an affirmation of faith. Robeson assigned the chant a special status, describing it as a Kaddish that is very close to my heart, a piece that means much more than just another song, and one that I sing at almost every concert I do.
A good day to thee, Lord God Almighty. I, Levi Isaac, son of Sarah from Berdichev. Here am I before thee, with a grave and earnest plea for this my people. What hast thou done to this thy people? Why hast thou so oppressed this thy people? Wherever sorrow, surely the sons of the oppressed. Whoever suffers, ever the sons of the oppressed. Whatever betide, there is spite against the sons of the oppressed. A God on high, on this earth how many nations, the Romans, the Persians, the Babylonians, the Germans, what boast they? Our ruler is above all rulers. The Romans, what boast they? Our kingdom is above all kingdoms. But I, Levi Isaac, son of Sarah, from Berdichev declare, is Gadol, the is Kadosh, Shemei Rabo, and I, Levi Isaac, son of Sarah, from Berdichev declare, from my place I will not move, I will not move from my place, and an end let there be to all this sorrow and suffering. Is Gadol, the is Gadol.